Moscow responding after the Obama administration imposes sanctions for its cyber meddling in the presidential election. Welcome to the very last America's Newsroom of 2016. And what a year it has been.
Boy, it has.
Unbelievable.
And it just seems to be speeding up as we end it. I'm Heather Childers. Bill and Martha are off, hopefully celebrating the new year.
As well they should. Been a long year for them. I'm Leland Vittert. Nice to be with you.
Well, the Obama administration expelling 35 suspected intelligence operatives and their families, giving them just 72 hours to leave the country, as well as targeting Russian intelligence agencies and companies. It is one of the biggest diplomatic confrontations between the U.S. and Russia since the Cold War. And all of this coming just 3 weeks before President-elect Trump takes office.
Our bottom line is that what Russia has been engaged in over the last few months and years is unacceptable. It's outside the norms of diplomatic behavior, and the president is sending a message today to tell them to cut it out.
Caroline Shively is live for us at the State Department. Caroline, any retaliation from the Russians so far?
Apparently not, Heather. After all the tough talk and even the threats we heard yesterday from Russian spokesmen, today Russian President Vladimir Putin came out and said they will not be sending any of our diplomats home. Here's his statement, quote, "We will not create problems for U.S. diplomats. We will not expel anybody." Now that's unusual because in past cases when we've kicked the Russians out, they have done a tit-for-tat expulsion of our diplomats. Putin also said in that statement, though, while they have the right to retaliate, they are waiting for the Trump administration to get into office before they make any decisions. Now, it's important to remember this is just an executive order by President Obama. Mr. Trump, as soon as he walks in the door on January 20th, he could roll it back, he could soften it, he could change it any way he wants. And that apparently is what the Russians are hoping for, at least. Here's his spokesman, Putin's spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, saying, quote, "We think that such steps of the U.S. administration that has 3 weeks left to work are aimed at two things: to further harm Russian-American ties, which are at a low point as it is, as well as obviously deal a blow to the foreign policy plans of the incoming administration of the president-elect." Heather?
It's interesting because the Russian Foreign Ministry, we reported this morning, had actually recommended that they expel the U.S. diplomats from Russia. So he's going the opposite direction. What is next for the U.S.? What's the next step for us?
Well, the State Department, as of noon, has told Russia there are two compounds that are going to be off limits for them. There was a compound in Long Island as well as one near us here in Maryland. U.S. officials believe that was used for intelligence gathering. Also, the 35 diplomats and their families have until Sunday to get out of here. The Trump administration doesn't seem impressed with these actions.
It is unprecedented for us to expel as a nation that many operatives over such a short period of time. But at the same time, the GRU, where these operatives are, they don't really travel here. They don't keep their assets here. So one wonders, what the teeth of the sanctions really are.
Mr. Trump says he will meet with U.S. intelligence officials about this topic next week. Heather?
All right. Caroline Shively, what a way to begin the year. Thank you so much.
You bet.
More on this. Alex Pappas, editor of Breaking News at the Washington Examiner. Alex, fair to say this is breaking news as it's happening, just getting some statements in from the Russians. We'll get to that in a minute. Headline, though, the Russians are not doing anything really in retaliation. Cold War tit for tat, they would normally kick our people out. What do you make of this? Is this sort of the Russians saying, okay, you caught us, our hand was in the cookie jar, fine, we'll take our punishment? Or is this them sort of trying to embarrass President Obama on the way out, as they've done with their tweets, and then sort of give President-elect Trump a leg up?
Well, I think, like everybody, they're waiting to see what Donald Trump actually says. I mean, in his statement last night, Donald Trump said he wants to move on to bigger and better things, though he did say that next week he's going to meet with some of these intelligence officials. So everyone here in the United States, and then I think Russia also wants to see what exactly is Trump going to do and say. Does he want to, would he actually reverse these sanctions? What's he actually going to say? And of course, Trump is in a pretty tough spot here. He's expressed no appetite for these sorts of things in recent weeks. And it's not just Obama, it's members of his own party that are going to be putting a lot of pressure on him. John McCain, Lindsey Graham, both say they want stronger sanctions. Lindsey Graham has even suggested that in these upcoming confirmation hearings that this is going to be a big issue for someone like Rex Tillerson, the nominee for Secretary of State, saying that if Rex Tillerson doesn't acknowledge Russia's roles in these cyber attacks, that he may not even vote for him. So then there's this question of, would Rex Tillerson actually go out and say something different, a different position from Donald Trump in these confirmation hearings? So I think that all brings it back to this. What is Trump actually going to say?
Well, what is Trump actually going to say because of the position Mr. Trump has been put in by President Obama, which brings us to this. Did the President of the United States, President Obama, suddenly decide after 8 years that, oh, gee, Russia's a clear and present danger, they hack us all the time, therefore now in the last couple of weeks we should retaliate because I'm going to be the commander-in-chief and I've seen the light now? Or is this sort of a political move, if you will, against Donald Trump in a parting shot?
It could be a little bit of both. And I tell you what, it's also interesting because Donald Trump has been criticizing President Obama this week, saying that he's putting up roadblocks, making things a little bit more difficult for this transition. And you would imagine that this is exactly the sort of thing that Donald Trump is talking about.
Well, it's certainly a distraction the first 100 days. The Russians, in part, putting out a statement just in the past couple of minutes, furthering what Caroline Shively reported. This from Vladimir Putin, saying, "We regret the recent unfriendly steps taken by the outgoing U.S. administration is provocative and aimed at further weakening the Russia-U.S. relationship. This runs contrary to the fundamental interests of both Russian and American people. Considering the global security responsibilities of Russia and the United States, this is also damaging to international relations as a whole." Now, that's the statement. Let's look at the tweet of what the Russians put out yesterday. This came from the Russian embassy in the United Kingdom. President Obama expels 35 diplomats in Cold War deja vu, as everybody and American people will be glad to see the last of this hapless administration and lame duck. You can't imagine that GIF was an accident.
Yeah, and so obviously the Russians are saying right there they want to see what Donald Trump's going to do, and they think Donald Trump could be different from President Obama. I mean, it is interesting that that Trump does seem to be reticent here because he thinks it's an attack on his legitimate win as President of the United States. He thinks that if you acknowledge that Russia was doing these cyber attacks to try to hurt Hillary Clinton and help him, that means he didn't win. But I do think Trump could come out here and make an argument and say, I condemn cyber attacks, but at the same time point to something that came out in those emails that WikiLeaks put out that hurt Hillary Clinton, that made someone not vote for Hillary Clinton because of something they saw in that emails. I still have a hard time pointing to one specific thing in any of those emails that came out. Yes, it caused chaos. It hurt Debbie Wasserman Schultz at the DNC. It embarrassed Podesta. But what did it do to actually change the election?
Well, to that point, and quickly here, though, it seems as though President Obama is essentially acknowledging that the Russians succeeded in doing what they've long done in other countries, which is try to undermine the democratic process to whatever end it may be.
Yes, and that's why you have a bunch of Democrats that I think are upset about this, and they're saying, they've been putting a lot of pressure on Obama, saying, if the intelligence agencies are saying that the Russians tried to influence the election, we need to have some sort of retaliatory action, and that's why he did it.
Well, and evidently a briefing coming to Congress on exactly what those intelligence agencies have found out. More on that with Adam Kinzinger a little bit later after the break. In the meantime, appreciate it, sir. Good to see you. Happy New Year to you and yours.
Now to developing news from Syria, where the ceasefire appears to be holding. Russia and Turkey negotiated that truce, which took effect at midnight. Kitty Logan is live for us in London. Kitty, what is the situation like in Syria right now?
Well, Heather, that ceasefire just came into force at midnight local time. It is largely holding, though there have been some isolated reports of clashes overnight. What we're hearing from Syrian monitors is reports of fighting near Idlib almost immediately after that ceasefire started last night. And some 12 hours later, there were clashes north of Damascus. Not clear how that started, but Syrian government jets are said to have carried out several airstrikes in response. And observers also say that helicopter gunships were deployed. Elsewhere, there is said to be relative calm. Now, of course, the Syrian president himself announced this ceasefire yesterday in a deal brokered by Turkey and Russia. It's the third formal ceasefire in this long-running conflict. It doesn't include ISIS, but several Syrian opposition groups signed up for it. They say they're reasonably optimistic, but these overnight clashes, Heather, illustrate just how fragile this ceasefire might actually be.
And what about plans for the future?
What we're hearing from Russia is that there's set to be a further round of talks in Kazakhstan in the near future. No date set for that. Of course, Russia played a key role in brokering this ceasefire. For the first time, the US wasn't included in any of these talks, but the Russian foreign minister says that may change once the new president takes office. But this current ceasefire will have to hold firm before the next round of talks can take place. Heather.
All right, Kitty Logan, live for us from London. Thank you.
And it is that time of year again. Fox News Alert as we take a live look at Times Square. Preparations underway for a New Year's Eve party at the crossroads of the world as we look down the street that will soon be filled with tens of thousands of revelers. Coming up, we're going to look at what New York's finest are doing to keep more than 1 million people safe as they ring in 2017.
Not a lot of traffic there right now.
There will be.
Surprising. Plus, President Obama won 2 terms and his approval ratings above 50%. But will his legacy be the downfall of the Democratic Party? We'll have a fair and balanced debate.
And are the sanctions against Russia for election hacking tough enough? Congressman Adam Kinzinger joins us live. But first, here's Kellyanne Conway.
This is great political fanfare and largely symbolic, but will it have impact? Will these sanctions have impact? It is unprecedented for us to expel as a nation that many operatives over such a short period of time. I don't think at the height of the Cold War we even did that.
More than 1 million people expected in Times Square tomorrow night to watch that big ball drop and ring in 2017. And New York City police, they are beefing up security following, of course, the truck attacks targeting big crowds in Germany and France this year. Officials say that they plan to surround Times Square with 20-ton sanitation trucks and about 100 patrol cars. 7,000 officers will be on the scene, along with counter-terror units and bomb-sniffing dogs, to keep everyone safe.
Senator John McCain, chairman of the Armed Services Committee, saying he'll push even stronger for sanctions on Russia when the new Congress convenes next week, as some critics charge the Obama administration response to Russian interference in the U.S. election as too little, too late. Here's Ambassador John Bolton on Special Report.
What the president announced today was incoherent and inadequate, which is fairly typical of his foreign policy. As for the statement by President Obama that other unspecified actions will be taken in the future, this president has no credibility when it comes to that.
Wow, strong words. Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, pilot in the Air National Guard, friend of the show, joins us now. Congressman, nice to see you, sir. Happy end of 2016.
You too.
All right, as we go forward on this, it was interesting. Earlier in the show, we played a soundbite from Eric Schultz, the deputy press secretary at the White House, who gave interviews yesterday. And he said, quote, the reason we're doing this is because this is outside the norms of diplomatic behavior by the Russians. I've heard stronger words from teachers who weren't happy with second graders.
Yeah, I mean, that's typical of this administration. You look at, Russia's basically behind the bombing of a UN aid convoy in Syria, and not much of a peep out of the administration. They use precision-guided munitions to bomb innocents in Aleppo, Syria. You don't hear much out of the administration. And then, with this, and I think this is a good beginning to the sanctions on Russia, but it's kind of done in a way that's, again, outside of diplomatic norms. I think the big thing to keep in mind here, there are some that say that Donald Trump is president because of the Russian hacking. That's absolutely not true. There are some that say the Russian hacking never happened. That's not true either. The fact is, in Congress and Americans, we need to find out exactly what happened to defend our Constitution, which we are sworn to defend and protect against all enemies, foreign and domestic. As a military pilot and as a congressman, we need to figure out how to maintain the integrity of our election system. And when people try to mess with that, an attempt or anything like that, there needs to be pretty swift punishment.
Is it bigger, though, than simply messing with our election system? This seems to be sort of a systematic threat by the Russians, more than against elections, but sort of against the United States, against our prestige around the world, saying that we can't participate in peace talks in Syria, saying that we're going to bomb whoever we want inside Syria, bombing some of the people that we've already trained inside Syria.
Yeah, well, look, they're in eastern Ukraine right now, and we still won't give offensive weapons to the Ukrainians. They still occupy part of Georgia. They're messing with the Baltics. Yes, I mean, this is Russia advancing until they hit a real red line, not a fake red line, and they haven't hit that yet. So I think, the big thing to keep in mind is I personally don't think the Russians...
So a real red line, obviously we know that President Obama has drawn a lot of red lines, and they haven't met very much. President-elect Trump seems to be not really interested in drawing a red line with the Russians. He seems much more interested in making friends with them. Is that going to work?
Well, I think and hope that changes. I mean, it's one thing to say we want to engage the Russians and have conversations.
You think and hope that Mr. Trump's policies change?
I do. Well, it's one thing to say, you know, we want a re-engagement. That's fine. President George W. Bush did it. Barack Obama did it. Barack Obama did it to great failure. So it's one thing to say we want to kind of have a fresh look at this. But it's another thing to say we still have to maintain America's role in the world. And the Russians have been advancing while we're retreating. The big thing to keep in mind with this wasn't, I don't necessarily think, an attempt to make Trump president by the Russians, but I think it's an attempt to undermine the faith of the Constitution. You know, the Constitution is just a paper document until people agree, like we all do, that we're going to abide by those principles. And if you undermine the idea that we can elect people who we want to elect, that's when you begin to erode the faith in the Constitution. So that's why defending our election system is so important, not relitigating the election, but to say we have to defend our Constitution.
Do you have faith in President-elect Trump to restore that faith in the Constitution, to do what's necessary with Russia and perhaps the Chinese as well, to make it clear that this is not acceptable behavior and there are consequences?
Yeah, two of the three I do. The Constitution and bringing faith back into it, I do. China, he's been very aggressive on, I agree. The question mark is Russia, and I hope that once he's sworn in and gets, you know, all the briefings that a president gets and understands that, you know, each president in the past has tried to re-engage.
He tells us all the time that he's gotten all the briefings that a president does, that he's very smart, he doesn't need to get them every day, he understands everything, and still he seems to say, hey, we should make friends with Vladimir Putin. What gives you confidence that that's going to change?
Well, I have hope. I guess I'm trying to be optimistic about it. Okay. I think if he continues down what he's saying, I think there's going to be trouble with fighting Congress on that. You know, we understand. I've been in this job for 6 years, and all along we've seen the Russians advance and push America out of areas, kill innocent people and everything else. I'm hoping that changes. Again, it's okay to say we want to re-engage the Russians and have talks. That's great. But it's another thing entirely to say, hey, they're really our friends. They're really the great protector. That's not the case at all. And I hope some of his words change, but I think he's going to be a fantastic president on a lot of fronts.
All right. Well, we'll have you come back and talk about not only that, but also the intelligence briefings that y'all are going to get in terms of exactly what this administration has on the Russian hacking. Congressman, Happy New Year to you and yours. Thanks for joining us. Good to see you, sir.
You bet. You too. See ya.
Heather?
Well, a ski trip turning tragic for one family. The accident that left a mother dead and her two young daughters injured.
Plus, Republicans vowing a fast repeal of Obamacare in the new year. But what happens if there's nothing ready to replace it?
If we don't get rid of Obamacare, it will destroy health care in North Carolina and all over the United States. It will be the end. I'm asking for your vote so we can replace Obamacare and save health care.
A holiday ski trip turning tragic for a Texas family this Christmas week when a 40-year-old woman and her two daughters fell 20 feet from a chairlift at a small Colorado ski resort. The mother died. Her daughters, 9 and 12, were injured. It's unclear exactly what caused them to fall off the lift. You see the lift there. State regulators are now investigating.
We will repeal the disaster known as Obamacare and create new health care, all sorts of reforms that work for you and your family. And we are going to be doing it properly. And we will not spend $5 billion for a website.
President-elect Trump and the new Republican-controlled Congress promising a quick repeal of Obamacare, but they haven't yet announced any detailed plan for exactly how they're going to replace it, leading to questions about how easy it will be to unravel a very complex system that has been in effect for several years. Joining me now is Gene Marks. He's a CPA with the Marks Group and a columnist for The Washington Post. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Heather.
So we just heard the president-elect say, you know, we're not going to spend $5 billion or what on a website, but do they know much beyond that as to what they're going to do?
Yes and no. It's a very tough thing to talk about right now because we've gotten different ideas from different people in the Republican Party. We know that on the Democratic side, Chuck Schumer, who's the minority leader, is vowing to fight anything that happens. And don't forget, no matter what the Republicans want to do, the Democrats have 48 votes in the Senate. They only need 3 to really kind of block any type of like big time legislation. So it really has to be something bipartisan, Heather. So, there's one thing for sure. You and I both know they are going to repeal Obamacare. That is without a doubt that is going to happen. Too many promises have been made, for that. The issue is whether or not they're going to repeal it without a plan in place, or if they actually are going to just have a repeal with a plan in place, something that they're going to defer this implementation. My bet is they are going to do just that. I mean, they'll repeal it. But they're going to have some kind of plan in place to sort of implementation over a period of time.
Chuck Schumer, you mentioned him. He had an interesting quote about all this. He said that the Republicans are like a dog that caught the bus. So now they don't know what to do with it. I like that quote. But okay, so you have 6.4 million people who are now under Obamacare. You had the White House announce that an additional 400,000 people signed up, or it was 400,000 newly enrolled Americans over the same period last year. So now that the numbers are increasing, will that give Republicans pause when it comes to replacement?
Yeah, and not only that, remember, the Kaiser Family Foundation, who follows all things healthcare, they just had a poll that came out after the election that showed that only 26% of Americans actually favored a repeal of Obamacare. So all of these factors are coming into play to give the Republicans, like you just said, a pause to figure out what they want to do. Here are some things that they definitely have some consensus on. So for you and I and our health insurance, for people that are trying to figure out how it's going to affect them, next year, whatever happens, pre-existing conditions, that's got bipartisan support that's going to remain. People that have pre-existing conditions are going to continue to get coverage. Kids that are living up to the age of 26 with their parents, there's bipartisan support to make sure that remains in the new bill. But after that, it really is a question of whether or not block grants are going to be given to the states for Medicaid, whether health savings accounts, if we can open up our own individual health savings accounts.
And a big question, though, is the timing, also the timing of when any of this would be implemented. And that's one of the things that people fear, that all of a sudden all these folks are not going to have health insurance, but that really is not the case.
It's not. So, and the bottom line is this, and what we're telling our clients, for 2017, we're not going to see a whole lot of changes in our healthcare coverage. Rates are locked in. They're a lot higher than they were just a couple of years ago, but they are locked in. The big change that we're going to start seeing will be in 2018, and you're absolutely right about the timing. What is going to happen, not this year in 2017, how are the effects of any changes going to affect us the year after? And that's still up in the air. We have to keep a close eye on it.
Yeah, you mentioned the 26% of people who want to repeal it. You can add to that, though, 17% who want to scale it back. So, a lot of people want to see some changes, and we'll see if the new administration does that smoothly. Gene, thank you so much.
Sure, that's fine, Heather. Take care.
Sorry, got to wrap you up. Happy New Year.
No worries.
Bye-bye.
Happy New Year to you.
And just in time for New Year's, a powerful nor'easter slamming New England, dumping nearly 2 feet of snow in some places, and as you can tell, making a giant mess on the roads. Janice Dean on deck with the latest on the storm's path.
Plus, Cold War level tension between the U.S. and Russia. We will hear from the Trump team about the president-elect's response to the new sanctions. But first, a memorable moment from the presidential debates. Remember this?
Look, Putin, from everything I see, has no respect for this person.
Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
It's pretty clear you won't admit that the Russians.
President-elect Donald Trump about to inherit a giant foreign policy issue. New sanctions slapped on Russia. The Obama administration retaliates for Moscow's cyber meddling in the presidential election. And Mr. Trump suggesting that it's time to turn the page, saying, quote, "It's time for our country to move on to bigger and better things. Nevertheless, in the interest of our country and its great people, I will meet with leaders of the intelligence community next week in order to be updated on the facts of this situation." And Boris Epstein is Director of Communications for the Presidential Inaugural Committee, and he joins us now to talk a little bit more about this. Thank you for joining us, first of all.
Sure. Good morning, Heather. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Now, there have already been some changes today. There was earlier this morning a recommendation that Russia impose sanctions on the U.S., but then Vladimir Putin has now come forward with a statement saying that they are not going to do that. They're going to hold off until the president-elect takes office. Has he spoken about any of the new developments yet this morning?
Well, the president-elect made it very clear yesterday that it is time to move on to key issues, but he is going to be meeting with those leaders of the intelligence community to get full facts and information on this, and we'll go from there.
Do you know that if he has spoken with Vladimir Putin, or if there's been any effort to reach out?
The information out there, the statement yesterday, I think says it all, and that the president-elect is focused on making sure America is stronger, America is united, America is a leader in the world once again and leads from the front, not from behind. But again, he will get full facts and information on this next week from the leaders in the intelligence community.
I know that specifically there's no information that directly ties or discusses how these potential hacks influence the election outcome. But there is proof that's been put forward that Russia did in fact hack the DNC. They hacked John Podesta's emails. So the Trump campaign, the campaign at the time, what do they think in terms of moving forward in future elections?
Well, Heather, what we're focused on now is bringing America together, and that's what we're doing here at the Presidential Inaugural Committee in planning a uniting and exciting inaugural. And as we look forward to future campaigns, and we look forward to the inauguration, of course, safety and security, both physical safety and security and cybersecurity are first and foremost.
Are you worried about this happening for future campaigns? Are you worried about the reaction of the United States and what it also tells other countries as to how we'll handle situations like this, countries like China?
Heather, we're not worried. Heather, the concentration again is on post-politics now, not about any political moves, any political rhetoric or political stunts. It's all about Americans being together, working together for a greater America moving forward.
So let's talk a little bit about the Obama administration, and as they are leaving with just weeks to go, do you believe that some of these moves that they are making are an effort to put roadblocks up for the president-elect and his incoming administration, including the sanctions that were just put on Russia?
I'm not here to criticize the Obama administration. It's up to them. They have a few weeks to go. And we're focused on what's going to be happening on January 20th at noon, the swearing in of the new president, and truly a new day in America, both domestically and abroad. So that's our concentration.
Okay. So since you've mentioned that a time or two, let's talk about what will be happening, switching gears. So what is the latest from the inaugural committee? What can you share with us? New information?
Well, the new information right now, I'm proud to announce on your air, we'll be putting out information about the parade participants.
Okay.
We'll have over 8,000 participants from 40 organizations representing the truly best of America marching in the inaugural parade on January 20th, representing folks from all over this beautiful country, representing New York City, the NYPD Emerald Pipes and Drums, representing New York's police force, Columbus North High School representing Indiana. So both home states, home cities of the President-elect Donald J. Trump and Vice President-elect Michael Pence would be represented during the inaugural parade, and many others. And of course, the military will be well represented at the parade as well. So we're very excited and honored to make that announcement here today.
Wonderful. Yes, the military, a huge part of the entire election and the campaign of Donald Trump. How long will that parade itself be?
Well, that's actually a great question. This is not going to be as long of a parade as has been had in the past. So during for Dwight Eisenhower, parade lasted, I believe, almost 6 hours. The parade in 2009 for President Obama was long, but Donald J. Trump is here to work. So this parade will be, about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, somewhere in that range. We don't have a specific time set, but it will be a representative parade. It'll be a uniting parade and a diverse parade. But again, all goes with the messaging of this being a workmanlike inaugural, because Donald J. Trump, as he's already shown in the discussions on jobs coming back to America, you saw with Carrier, Sprint, etc., on the discussions with Boeing and Lockheed Martin, making sure we're not overpaying, even for vital instances like Air Force One and F-35s. So Donald J. Trump is here to work. He's been working throughout the transition. He is eager to get to work as president of this country at noon on January 20th.
January 20th is fast approaching.
That's right.
Thank you so much, Boris. Appreciate you joining us, and Happy New Year to you.
Thanks for having me. Happy New Year.
Sad statistic as we end the year. Shootings and violent crime have skyrocketed in Chicago. More than 750 murders in the city over the course of 2016. That is more than New York City and Los Angeles combined. Police there now bracing for what could be a bloody New Year's weekend. Mike Tobin live from Chicago with more. Mike, nice to see you. How much worse is it this year than last?
As you mentioned, the rate of shootings, the rate of murders in the city of Chicago is absolutely dramatic, and Chicago police do anticipate an uptick of violence with the holiday weekend. Spokesman says that's because you pour booze on top of this endless cycle of gangland vendettas. As of Thursday, Chicago police reported some 756 murders in the city of Chicago compared to 484 last year. That's an increase of 56%. 3,525 shootings versus 2,400 last year, an increase of 47%. An overwhelming number of the victims are black. Most of the shooting targets are documented gang members. The former Chicago police superintendent, Gary McCarthy, who lost his job in the wake of the Laquan McDonald videotape shooting, says the reason for the increase in the bloodshed is that policing has become politicized and cops are hamstrung.
The politicizing of policing is ending up killing more black lives. The number of police-related shootings in this city is less than half of 1% of the shootings in the city of Chicago. So what does that mean? 99.6% of the shootings are civilian on civilian, generally black on black. 80% African Americans are dying, and it's a 90% increase from 2 years ago.
Now, Christmas weekend alone, a dozen people were killed. 11 of the shooting targets were gangland vendettas, and the reason for the timing is that the gang rivals knew that the targets would be home. Leland?
Unbelievable, Mike. Where is the outrage? Where are the demonstrators? We see them after police-involved shootings. They never seem to come out when there's 11 or 12 people shot over Christmas weekend.
Well, they'll be out this weekend, and Father Michael Pfleger, a well-known activist from the bad areas of Chicago, is going to take the demonstration once again out of the troubled areas and take it to the glitz of Chicago's Magnificent Mile. They're supposed to haul some 700 caskets representing the people who have been killed in Chicago.
I'm hoping first that we will be shamed by it and say, oh my God, this can't happen anymore. But then we will be shaken to do something.
At least in the organizational stage, this demonstration is not supposed to be anti-cop. Father Pfleger, however, admits there's always a chance when you get a bunch of people that the message can get diluted. Leland?
Yeah, we've seen that happen before in Chicago. Mike Tobin will be covering it all. Thanks, Mike. Stay safe this weekend.
You got it.
Heather?
Thank you.
President Obama facing criticism in his final weeks at the White House as critics argue that he did more harm than good to the Democratic Party. Our political panel joins us for a fair and balanced debate.
Plus, an out-of-this-world addition to the 2016 mannequin craze. All right, challenge accepted.
Wow.
The jaw-dropping video. This is tough to do in zero gravity. Wow. You need astronauts to do that.
Yeah, hashtag winning. The mannequin challenge has been a highlight of 2016 for a lot of folks, and this one might top them all. Astronauts, look at this on the International Space Station getting in on the fun. How impressive is this? Leland, they are weightless, they are floating, no gravity. Could you do this?
They clearly have too much time on their hands, really.
Yes, they're all standing and staying perfectly still. I should say floating perfectly still. French astronaut Thomas Pesquet tweeting out this video, calling the results sci-fi spooky. I call it amazing.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's like magic.
Wow.
How'd they do that?
What a New Year's present for us all. There you go. All right, here we go. President Obama trying to solidify his legacy with just 3 weeks left in office. But some critics say he's leaving the Democratic Party in far worse condition than he found it 8 years ago.
You look at the destruction of the Democratic Party under Barack Obama's leadership, and you have to wonder, you know, what was the political, what were the electoral benefits that he gave to the party? He leaves them in a much worse position. The states are decimated. They've lost control of the House and the Senate. The governorships are decimated. So yeah, maybe he is obviously a gifted candidate. He did win election twice by substantial margins. But you know, his legacy as a politician is a bit muddied by all that.
For those of you who missed the name, that was Sam Stein of the Huffington Post. Here to talk about it, Kristen Soltis Anderson, columnist for the Washington Examiner, a Republican pollster and author of the selfie vote. Pablo Manriquez, former DNC official. Nice to see both of you. Kristen, first to you. Remarkable in a sense that this was said by the editor of the Huffington Post, a clearly liberal organization that was willing to take this kind of stand against President Obama, who they've championed for so long. But the thought itself, isn't that novel or insightful, right?
I think Sam's absolutely right. I think that President Obama was very good at winning elections for himself, but that power has not been transferred. And in 2008, when Republicans lost, and bear in mind, didn't just lose in 2008, but had lost badly in 2006, that's when Nancy Pelosi became Speaker, really took a look and said, how can we win again? And you had smart folks like Ed Gillespie, former RNC chair, who said, you know, if we go to the states, that's where there's some low-hanging fruit, some races where we can really make an impact. And let's try to win there, because so many decisions that affect people's lives are not just made by the president or made in Washington, but are made in the states by governors, by state legislatures. So Republicans made this very smart, strategic decision to focus on winning races elsewhere. Meanwhile, on the Democratic side, you had the Organizing for America organization, the Obama campaign's offshoot that I think sort of drew energy away from other Democratic groups. And so now you have a case where Republicans don't just have the White House and don't just have Congress, but now have state governments across the country where they are really making a difference and putting in place policies that are giving Democrats a lot of heartburn.
Pablo, you got a lot of heartburn?
Well, I mean, you know, you talk to the old timers.